I've been playing Valkyria Chronicles 4 on the PlayStation 4, and it is a beautiful game, as every fan of Valkyria Chronicles would expect. It is a strategy
Don't forget
role-playing
it.
game,
Like there's any
strategy
chance of that.
JRPG, with a lot of really dramatic cut sequences that take us into these conflict situations where you have control of a bunch of units, and it's set in an alternate World War II kind of reality, where you play part of this group called the Federation. You're like this little troop called the E class or something like that, or the E group, and you are facing against the Empire. And so it's kind of like you're fighting a bunch of cartoonish Nazis. And so what you've got to do is you've got to command a bunch of your troops, and you've got lancers, which are all right against tanks. You've got grenadiers, which are grenadiers. I don't say that word very often. Who can blow up a bunch of bad guys or tanks or whatever in sort of this sort of area effect thing. They can drop it in, kind of like a mortar. You've also got scouts who can cruise along inside of your battlefields a little bit further and scout the area and take some shots, but they're not especially that strong. And you've also got engineers who are kind of like the scouts, but they can refill ammo and they can repair stuff. You can control a tank in there as well, and you play as a bunch of these different characters because you command each one of the units, but you're basically in the shoes of Claude, who is leading the E troop, and I don't know if it is a troop or class, it's something. And you're leading the rest of the people under your command against all of these different oppressors out there. And you've got to try to sneak in, not get seen in a lot of these different battlefields, take out some of their sort of forward patrols, and then flank them as best you can. You have to keep your leader characters alive. If you do lose them, you're going to have to replay missions over and over again, which is incredibly frustrating. I had to do that. And you know what's incredibly satisfying about this game is that the combat is it really works. You have a little bit of control of the characters, so you've got a little bit of this sort of third-person action element in there. So it's all about positioning and where you place your character before you go into the targeting mode. But you have a sense of agency. Like, you have a real sense of, like, you know how this battle is going to unfold. Of course, there is a little bit of a rolling the dice element every time you do go into targeting mode. Sometimes the shots that you think are perfectly lined up will not hit, which is par for the course with strategy titles. And then, of course, after you've completed all of the turns, you've used all of your action points and your command points, the enemy has a chance to counterattack you. And there's also counterattacks that happen in real time as you're repositioning your characters. All of that stuff, all of the on-the-field combat is really, really enjoyable. And it's very much analogous to and very much in line with the first Valkyria Chronicles game, which I think came out about 10 years ago now. The art style, everything, the look it evokes, the moods that it evokes, all of it are very reminiscent of the early days of Valkyria Chronicles, which is good news for fans, but it doesn't really progress the game concepts much farther than the first game. It's like they took the first game, put in new characters, a lot of the same kind of background of the overall story of Valkyria Chronicles is kind of the same, but it's from a different perspective this time. But if you've played the first one, you're going to be very familiar with the way that things unfold in this game. There are some things that bug the hell out of me. You'll use action points sporadically by getting stuck on the geometry, which really bugged me, like trying to maneuver a tank around stuff or maneuver characters. Sometimes there's mines and things like that your camera just isn't positioned properly. That's a little user error, but you can walk onto things because the camera isn't perfectly positioned, and then suddenly you've got to go and rescue that character. There is permadeath in this game as well if you don't get to those characters and get a nurse in there to extract them, which sucks, but you can be smart and avoid all of that. So managing my action points and not sort of squandering them by, improper positioning bugged me. I also was a little bit perturbed by the unskippable animations and things like that in this game as well. And when you have to replay a mission 3 or 4 times because you've let one of your leaders die and you've got to see the tutorial bits pop up over and over again, it just drives you crazy. Or just even the speech bubbles and the character bubbles. All of that stuff I love normally. It's really cool, and I actually kind of got into the story. There is definitely this sense of learning to have compassion for your characters. They're all young characters. They're all seeing the horrors of war. Maybe not for the first time, but there are definitely some neophytes in here, and there's people that, like Neige, who is this sniper, has like sometimes gets stage fright, and so she misses shots because she gets nervous when she's out in the middle of the battlefield. And so your heart gets kind of tugged a little bit as you're playing this, but it's also got some weird, creepy kind of dynamics in there. Raz, in particular, is this gung-ho, this sort of jerky character who's like slapping his female soldiers' butts and always just saying everything's a shit show, and then running into combat and just offending people left, right, and center. And it was like, wow, man, they're really going for it. And what's weird is the juxtaposition of the odd music choices, where it's all just happy, bouncy, loopy music, and Raz is just being an asshole. So it's kind of hard to care for him, but then, he's a shock trooper with quite a bit of ability, and so in the next sequence when you're actually on the battlefield, you'll find yourself using Raz all the time because he does really kick some ass out there. So there's some weird dichotomy of liking some of these characters, feeling for them, and I don't know if some of the overly sexualized kind of moments in here, like Claude mistakenly looks under a female soldier's dress and gets all embarrassed, and she gets all embarrassed, and I don't know if the game makers were kind of making a comment on the fact that these are young people and they're sort of dealing with their hormones as well as the horrors of war at the same time. But it certainly makes you pause and think and go, well, I've never really encountered that kind of storytelling before with one of these games, which was kind of cool, and it gives its own charm, gives the game its own charm. And quite frankly, I think it's just it's a really fun escape. I played it on the PlayStation 4. I didn't get a Switch code, but this seems like the perfect experience to be able to play with you, take anywhere and play it anywhere you want to, because it's kind of a storybook kind of way that it's presented, and the whole framework for the game as you're leafing through pages of a book, which sort of fits with the watercolor art style of the game, which is again gorgeous. I did feel, though, that there was a game to be made with Valkyria Chronicles where you strip away a lot of the storytelling and you just get right down to the basics, because commanding your troops and taking turns with the enemy AI was super fun, and I would have loved to just get down to kind of like a more elaborate Advance Wars kind of vibe with this experience. And I also feel like there's a missed opportunity for multiplayer here, but I think Sega's in a bit of a reinvention mode with this franchise. They just want to bring people back to it. And do I think it's worth your time? 100%. It's really addictive, it's really well made, it's beautiful art style, cool music, and it's unique, and we don't really have a lot of these turn-based strategy experiences, especially of this ilk, which are approachable and accessible. This isn't like Civilization or XCOM or something like that. This is a lot more accessible, and all of the embedded storytelling also draws you in. It's terrific. It's not perfect, but I want more, and I hope that this is a success, and maybe we'll get some cool DLC or some kind of after-the-fact multiplayer mode or something like that. For now, I'm giving Valkyria Chronicles 4 an 8 out of 10.